They left me by gate C5 with a dead phone and a deed they thought was clean. Mark squeezed my shoulder like a salesman closing a deal. Leela kept the SUV idling at the curb, eyes on her camera instead of me. "Non-stop to Tampa, Dad. You'll love the sun," he said. I looked down at a boarding pass that wasn't there and a battery icon that was a red sliver of mercy. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Cleveland Hopkins smelled like burnt espresso and winter coats. The loudspeaker crackled. Not my name, not any name I needed. I stood under the departures board, reading cities I wasn't going to. When my phone died, it did it politely. One last blink. Then the black mirror showed me a man in his late 60s who had been talked into signing a deed on October 10th because his son said Medicaid planning, like it was a lifeboat. My wife used to say, "Paper only bites if you don't read it." I had read it. I'd circled a paragraph that saved my life later. But standing there at 6:17 p.m., I just felt dumb. The airline agent typed like a pianist trying to save a dying song. "There's no ticket, sir. Not in your name." I nodded, swallowed, and slid a $312.40 rebooking onto my credit card. Cleveland to nowhere, really. Just home again. I used the courtesy phone to call Mark. It rang into silence. The last voicemail I'd managed to record earlier was him on speaker, wind in the background. "House is ours now, okay? Paperwork's done." He said ours like I was luggage they'd checked. Deshawn, the Uber driver, had a warm laugh that didn't fit the night. His dashcam blinked a red dot while I tried not to sound like a child. "They took my house," I heard myself say. He didn't respond with pity. He said, "Address?" Like directions could fix blood. 48:19 later, we rolled into Parma. Porch lights clicked on up and down the street like neighbors were taking attendance. My keypad, my code, beep, red, denied. The porch bulb was warm, newly screwed in. I felt for the hidden spare under the third step, found a spider and the old ache in my knee. Ruth from next door opened her storm door and held up a little brass key between two fingers. "Figured you'd need this," she said. "They came with boxes an hour ago." I don't like the way that girl laughs. Inside, the house wore someone else's scent. Sharpie, cardboard, a sugary candle that wasn't mine. My printer held a half-spooled page, a contractor estimate with $21,800 in bold. On the fridge, a magnet I'd never seen, Rush Demo Holidays, stared back like a dare. I laid the deed on the kitchen table, the one I'd refinished in 1992, with tar still under my nails. "Gunter reserves a life estate with right to rescind upon abandonment or caregiver neglect." My finger traced the sentence I'd circled when Mr. Cho, the elder law attorney, insisted it live there. Mark had smiled, then said, "Whatever makes you comfortable." He didn't look at the line. I did. The oven timer dinged at 2:17 a.m. without being set. Houses make noises when they're nervous. I sat in my late wife's chair and wrote 3 words on a notepad. Paper beats mouths. Then under that I wrote the date, October 28th, because humiliation deserves a ledger. I turned the porch light off, then on. If paper had gotten me into this, paper would get me out. I slept with the deed under my palm like it was a life jacket I'd stitched myself. Being left at the airport wasn't the worst part. The worst part was coming home to a house that called me. Guest. Morning cracked over. Parma like a thin sheet of ice. October 29th. And my own kitchen treated me like a stranger. I brewed coffee that tasted like cardboard and regret. The trash can lid wouldn't shut over a tangle of plastic, someone else's groceries, and a glossy Home Depot receipt lay folded in a triangle on top. I unfolded it like a small confession. Keypad deadbolt, 2 packs of A batteries, contractor bags, 189.63. I said the number out loud to the empty room. The way a man might say a prayer, a cardboard box on the dining chair had Sharpie across the top in a tidy hand that wasn't mine. Quilts. Donate? The question mark punched harder than the word. My wife had stitched those during chemo winters, a square for every month she kept living. I put the box on the table and slid my palm across it, slow, as if I could iron the question mark flat. My flip phone, charged on an outlet I'd installed myself, lit with a single missed call, and then rang. Mark's name. I let it buzz once, twice, then pressed green. "Dad, don't be dramatic," he said, as if I'd been telling jokes at the airport. A car blinker clicked in the background. "We're consolidating assets," he went on. "Interest rates are insane. Leela's brand is taking off. We need a studio. We're moving fast because we have to. This house is my retirement," I said, steady as I could. "Every receipt here is a deposit I made with my hands." I slid open the drawer where I keep bills and touched the gas bill, 4837 due Nov 3, like it could anchor me. "You changed the locks while I was in the air," he exhaled through his nose. "You were going to Tampa. The ticket wasn't real," I said. The boarding pass never existed. Silence, then the brittle, upbeat tone he uses when he wants a client to say yes. "We'll talk later. Layla's got a shoot." The call ended with that digital click that always sounds like a door locking. I carried my coffee, untouched, to the garage, a place that still smelled like me. Motor oil, cedar, last summer's cut grass. I opened the old union handbook from Local 47 and flipped to a page I'd dog-eared years ago about dependent elders and undue influence, back when I thought it applied to other people. The words looked like tools I hadn't needed yet. Fiduciary duty, benefit derived from pressure, capacity versus consent. I underlined benefit derived with a carpenter's pencil and wrote "Mark" in the margin, then erased the question mark and wrote the name plain. The eraser shed looked like sawdust on the page. At 10:12 a.m., a knock. Ruth stood there with the dented thermos and a look like she'd already cried for me. "They were in and out last night," she said, stepping inside without asking, "because neighbors who've watched you shovel snow for 20 winters don't need to be asked." He had a tape measure. She had lights. She said lights like a bad diagnosis. Ruth's niece is the family archivist of the street. She saves everything on her phone like a magpie. Ruth tapped and slid until a video filled the screen. My living room. The cuckoo clock doing 11 when it was 10. It's never been right. Leela stepping into frame, bathed in ring light glow, mouth-forming words to a tiny audience. A caption scrolled, "Studio in progress, before." My recliner, my wife's chair, pushed into a corner like a guilty thing. A man's voice, off camera, "Knock this by Thanksgiving. Proof can be ugly even when filtered warm." We set the phone on the table next to the deed. I read the sentence I'd circled on October 10th for the 10th time. "Grantor reserves a life estate with right to rescind upon abandonment or caregiver neglect." The word abandonment burned brighter now that I could name the place it happened, Gate C5. My hand made a fist without permission. I needed air that wasn't rebreathed anger. I walked to the porch and stared at the keypad that had denied me the night before. The battery indicator blinked its low battery stutter, 3 quick beeps, the kind that means, in the manual, recent change, replace soon. I listened to the neighborhood, the distant clack of a flagpole rope, a dog 3 doors down telling the world he owned the noon, the normal sounds of a street that had watched me paint gutters, replace shingles, fix porch rails without calling anyone. Back inside, I opened the kitchen drawer where I keep the church pamphlets that come in the mail. One was titled, "When Family is Your Caregiver, Read Before You Sign." I flipped to the section on transport abandonment. A line leapt out. "Leaving an elder at a transport hub without confirmed transfer or return constitutes neglect." I underlined transport hub and wrote airport. It felt like someone had put a tool in my hand that fit my grip just right. The phone hummed on the counter with a text from Mark, a photo of the top half of the deed, the big font that said, "Warranty Deed." "See?" "We all agreed," he wrote. I took a close-up of the bottom half, my circled sentence glowing under kitchen light, and sent it back. He replied with nothing. The dots bubbled, then disappeared. Somewhere in town, my son ran out of words. I opened the notebook I'd started at 2:17 a.m. and wrote a fresh list. By early evening, the house had that hollow sound again, like a church after people leave. The oven timer, possessed or just old, let out a single ding in the quiet. I turned it off at the wall. I carried the quilts box to the bedroom and cut the tape carefully with my pocket knife. laying each one back on the bed like I was putting months into the calendar again. Blue for February, green for May, maroon for December. My wife's stitches ran like small roads leading home. I sat, smoothed the last corner, and faced the truth. Grief is loud the first day, and then becomes a drip that can drown you if you let it. I would not drown. I wrote the date across the top of a fresh page, October 29th, and a single sentence under it. Humiliation isn't the end of the story. Its Exhibit AI set my alarm for 8 a.m. and placed the deed under it like a talisman. In the morning, I'd carry paper to the people who respect it, attorneys, bankers, clerks with stamps and rules. If my own child wanted my house to be a brand prop, then a judge would remind him it is a home. I clicked the porch light off and watched the dark settle around the glass like a promise. Tomorrow I begin undoing the thing they thought they finished. The next morning, October 30th, I ironed my shirt for the first time in years. Not because anyone would notice, but because paperwork deserves respect. I slid the deed into a manila folder, tucked my receipts behind it, and caught the 8:42 bus downtown toward Superior Avenue. The sun over Cleveland was a pale coin, the kind that buys clarity, not comfort. Mr. Cho's office sat between a bakery and a bail bondsman. The waiting room smelled like lemon cleaner and quiet frustration. His assistant, Grace, led me in. Cho looked up from a stack of wills, his wireframe glasses halfway down his nose. "You kept the original deed?" he asked. I nodded and laid it down like evidence in a trial. He read every line, tapping his pen softly. When his finger landed on the sentence I'd circled, he smiled, not polite but proud. "You reserved a life estate and the right to rescind upon abandonment. That's not common, and it's gold, Mr. Walker." He drew me a roadmap. Step 1, file a notice of rescission. Step 2, seek a temporary restraining order, TRO, to stop alterations. Step 3, cloud the title with a lis pendens so no sale or lien can go through. And we'll subpoena bank records if they tried to pledge the house as collateral. He handed me a yellow legal pad where he'd written, "No emotion, just filings and friction." "Can they fight it?" I asked. "They can try," he said, "but law runs on words, and you wrote yours wisely." He made 2 calls while I listened, one to Community Savings Bank and one to the county recorder's office. On speaker, the bank officer, Martha, answered. Her voice was clipped, efficient. "I see a pending contractor line under Mark Walker," she said. "Filed October 27th, but underwriting flagged a reserved life estate. We haven't funded it yet." Cho raised an eyebrow at me. Would you send a written confirmation?" "Sure," Martha said. "Expect a hold letter by November 5th. I mouthed thank you to nobody in particular. Next, we checked my phone for proof. The Uber receipt. The voicemail from Mark, the texts. Cho asked, "That voicemail still stored?" I nodded. "We'll transcribe it." Every word counts. At 11:15, he handed me a form stamped County Recorder's Notice of Rescission, Elder Grantor Protection. I signed twice, the pen shaking slightly. When I left his office, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a man holding a loaded document. I walked 2 blocks to Detroit Avenue, grabbed coffee, and texted Deshawn, the Uber driver who had given me a ride that night. "Need your dashcam clip, me saying they changed my locks. Date October 28th, he replied within minutes. At Starbucks near 75th Ken Airdrop. We met there, both awkward. He looked younger in daylight. "You okay, sir?" he asked. "I'm getting there," I said. He sent the clip to my phone, me in his backseat, voice raw. "They took my house. Timestamp 9:41 p.m. It was both proof and pain, caught in pixels. Keep a backup, he said. People delete things when scared. He didn't have to say who people meant. By afternoon, I stopped at Ruth's house. Her porch smelled like cinnamon candles and loyalty. "I've got something," she said, handing me a flash drive. "My niece pulled this from Lila's stories before she deleted them." I watched the clips on her laptop, Lila walking through my living room with a ring light, laughing. "Studio in progress," she said to her followers, the cuckoo clock off beat behind her. My recliner shoved against the wall like an inconvenience. Ruth's niece had also grabbed screenshots, captions, dates, and the tag Iraditar Thanksgiving Reveal. I printed them out that night, one per page, stapled them behind the deed, and labeled the packet Evidence I Social Media Self-Incrimination. At 6:20 p.m., Cho called again. Recorder's office accepted the filing. You're officially rescinding the transfer pending judicial review. No one can touch that title until we finish. He paused. But keep everything. Every bill, every call. We're building a story they can't rewrite. After we hung up, I opened the window over the sink. The cold air bit through the curtains, and for the first time in days, I smiled. I wasn't alone anymore. Paper was on my side. Before bed, I took out the notebook and added new entries. October 30th, plan in motion, Cho filed rescission. Bank hold incoming, Ruth and Deshawn, allies confirmed, evidence labeled and dated. Then, underlined twice, make them say it out loud. The house was silent except for the fridge hum and a faint creak of settling beams. I looked around and thought of how every corner held a receipt, a bill, or a piece of proof that I'd built this life. Tomorrow would be November 1st. The day filings turned into friction. I shut off the light, leaving only the soft glow from the porch outside. My house, my light, my fight. November 1st began with the sharp cold that makes the morning feel cleaner than it is. I tucked the manila folder under my arm and headed for the Cuyahoga County Courthouse, a place that smells like dusted marble and people trying to stay civil. Filing day? Paper day. The day I started fighting back. The clerk behind the counter wore a sweater that read, Legal Eagle. And when I laid down the forms Mr. Cho had prepped, the notice of rescission and temporary restraining, order request, she looked over the first page and nodded. You're doing this yourself? With counsel, I said. But it's my signature that counts. I paid the $146 filing fee in exact bills, unfolded from an envelope I'd labeled Justice Money. The clerk gave me a faint smile when she stamped the documents and handed me the yellow receipt. That soft thunk of the stamp hitting paper felt better than applause. Back home, Ruth was waiting with her dog, Clover, and 2 coffees. She'd seen the contractor truck idling down the street again, white van, blue lettering. They're planning something, she said. We walked around my bungalow, me with a notepad in hand. The spare key missing. E-pad battery changed October 28th, as the indicator beep still warned. My toolbox moved to the garage. In the kitchen drawer, under old coupons, I found a crumpled HVAC quote for $2,800. My name scratched out, Mark Walker penciled in. I slid it into a plastic sleeve. Proof smells like toner and fresh guilt. At noon, Martha from the bank called. Your son's contractor line is frozen. Underwriting's holding funds pending clarification of title. I could hear her sipping coffee through the receiver. You did file a rescission today, correct? Yes, I said. Good, she replied. Because I just saved you a house. The call lasted 3 minutes, but it bought me decades of peace. By evening, Deshawn stopped by on his way home from work. He held up a small envelope. I had my statement notarized, he said. Inside was his signed affidavit. I told him on October 28th in his Uber that my son changed my locks and left me stranded. The dashcam clip time matched his words. I thanked him, offered him gas money, which he refused. Just don't let them win, he said, tapping the dashboard before he drove off. The next day, November 2nd, we served the temporary restraining order notice on Mark and Lila. Cho hired a courier, fast, discreet, and wearing a tie that looked like it had seen 100 bad divorces. I waited across the street in Ruth's car, heater running. Mark opened the door shirtless, morning coffee in hand. Lila was filming something in the background, probably another one of her lifestyle videos. The courier handed over the envelope, said, served, and turned away. Mark's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Ruth whispered, he looks like a man whose credit card just got declined. They didn't chase the courier. They didn't even slam the door. They just stood there, staring at the papers that told them the house wasn't theirs yet. Not legally, not morally, not ever. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with the manila folder open like a war map. I added new tabs: bank, attorney, proof of abandonment, social media. Every sound outside, the garbage truck, the mail slot, the whine of wind, felt like an ally checking in. At 7 p.m. my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "Dad, you can't do this. We're family." I typed back, "Family doesn't change locks while you're in the air." No response. Just the 3 little dots, then nothing. I waited a minute, then powered the phone off. I opened my notebook to a clean page and wrote under the date, November 2nd, Phase 2. A. Let them talk in texts. B. Let the bank choke their cash flow. C. Make Thanksgiving the deadline they fear. I could feel the house breathing again. Not warm yet, but alert, aware. The same way it felt when my wife and I first moved in, sanding floors late into the night, promising we'd never let anyone else decide what belonged to us. At 2:17 a.m., that cursed oven timer dinged again without being touched. Maybe the wiring was off. Maybe it was something else. I got up, pressed the button, and said out loud, "Not yet. There's more cooking to do." I left the porch light on before going back to bed. Not for them, but for the truth I was building, one paper at a time. By November 4th, the air in Parma had that knife-edged chill that makes breath visible and tempers short. The neighborhood smelled of burning leaves, and every time the wind hit the front door, I swore I could still smell that awful vanilla candle Lila loved. The kind that tries too hard to be sweet. They'd gone quiet for 2 days, which worried me more than noise. Silence from guilty people is the sound of plotting. At 9:17 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Mark. "Dad, can we just talk? You agreed to all of this. We have plans." I stared at his words for a full minute before replying. "You changed my locks while I was in the air." He shot back a picture of the top half of the deed, the part that looked like a clean handover. Proof. I took my own photo of the bottom half, the one he always ignored. The line glowed under my kitchen light like a divine joke. Grantor reserves a life estate and right to rescind upon abandonment. I sent it. The dots bubbled, stopped, no reply. The silence was my favorite sound of the morning. By lunch, Martha from Community Savings called. Her voice had that sharpness of someone enjoying a rule being followed. "Just a heads up, Mr. Walker. Your son tried calling underwriting again. He wanted to know why his funds were frozen. I told him, because your father's still alive." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time since the airport. "You're my favorite banker," I said. "Just doing my job," she replied. You'd be surprised how often families try this. The paperwork never lies. Later that afternoon, Ruth texted me. "He's back." Clipboard man. I crossed the lawn to her porch and peered out. A man in a puffy vest and work boots paced the driveway, measuring the porch rail with a tape, muttering something about load-bearing. He looked like he was casing a crime scene instead of a remodel. Ruth, ever the scout, raised her phone and filmed him through the curtains. I called Mr. Cho right away. He answered on the first ring. "Perfect timing," he said when I told him. "We'll file a contempt warning, attempting modification while under restraining order." He dictated the language, slow and clean, so I could write it in my notebook. Deliberate disregard for injunction filed November 1st, 2025. Proof wasn't emotion. Proof was leverage. By November 5th, the underwriting hold letter arrived in the mail, typed, signed, and stamped in blue ink. I held it like a trophy. The line that mattered was simple. Funding denied pending clarification of life estate reservation. The bank's letterhead glistened faintly where my fingers left warmth, but then came the next twist. Lila's online world didn't stop just because the law said so. Ruth's niece, bless her digital soul, sent me screenshots that morning. Leela posing in my living room again, the cuckoo clock behind her, caption, "Before makeover coming soon." Another post said, "Kitchen reno in 10 days. The same contractor's logo was visible on the boxes stacked in the background. My stomach turned. I wasn't angry anymore. I was embarrassed for how little they understood consequences. So I printed every screenshot, labeled them Exhibit C, Public Self-Incrimination, and slid them into the growing folder. At 3:42 p.m., A thin envelope arrived from the courthouse, hearing scheduled, November 12th, courtroom 3C, probate real estate docket. I laid it on the table and whispered, "Game on." That night, I prepared like it was an exam I couldn't afford to fail. I ironed my only suit, polished shoes that hadn't seen sunlight since my wife's funeral. I stacked the evidence, deed with circled clause, airline rebooking receipt, Uber receipt, underwriting hold letter, doorbell footage screenshot, dash cam affidavit. Each page had its place. Each staple pointed toward the truth. Around midnight, I walked the house again, touching the frames, the counters, the little dents in the floor that only I knew the story of. This wasn't just property. It was 38 years of being somebody's husband, somebody's father, somebody's neighbor. They wanted equity. I wanted peace. But peace, like equity, has to be protected. At 2:17 a.m., the oven timer dinged again. I didn't flinch this time. I smiled. "I know," I said to the dark. "Something's about to burn." I went to bed with the manila folder on my chest, my hand resting over the circled words that would save me. November 12th, I thought. The day I'd make them say everything out loud. By November 9th, the world had gone unnervingly quiet again. No new texts, no posts. Just that thick waiting silence before a storm. I was at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold, folder open, when the porch light flickered, once, twice, then off. I opened the door just in time to hear voices outside. Leela's voice tight with irritation. "Mark, we can't just wait for the court date. We'll list it now. Disclosure or not, he's old. He won't fight." Then a man's voice, "Keep your voice down." They didn't know the Ring doorbell chime tone meant recording. I stood behind the curtain, watching the soft red glow of that tiny lens, catching every word. By the time their SUV backed out, I had a new weapon. Neglect and intent, caught clean on tape. At 5:42 p.m., my email pinged. It was from Martha at the bank. Subject, title defect, reserved life estate cannot secure. Attached were 6 replies in the chain. At the bottom was one line from Mark to the underwriter. "Can we close before the 11/12 hearing?" The bank's reply came just hours later. "No collateral until resolved." I leaned back, staring at that phrase. "No collateral until resolved." It felt like scripture. November 10th, a knock at the door. Certified mail. I signed, tore open the envelope, and read words that nearly made me laugh out loud. "We hereby revoke your permission to occupy said premises effective immediately." They'd tried to evict me from my own life estate. Mr. Cho chuckled over the phone when I read it to him. "Perfect," he said. "They just documented their own neglect. A self-signed admission of abandonment." That night he and I met at his office. The city was slick with cold rain. The streets gleamed like wet receipts. We sat at his desk while he lined up the exhibits. "Here's how it will go," he said. "We open with the deed, your clause. Then we present abandonment evidence. The Uber affidavit, the dashcam video, the voicemail from Mark, and this." He held up the certified eviction letter like a flag. "And last," he said, "we play the ring clip. Intent to sell before the hearing. Judges love when greed speaks clearly." I nodded, silent, letting the plan settle into my bones. Revenge wasn't rage anymore. It was rhythm. When I got home around 10 p.m., the porch light had burned steady again. On the table sat my phone, buzzing with a voicemail notification I hadn't noticed before, one that must have synced when I recharged it that afternoon. The timestamp, October 28th, 6:39 p.m., the night of the airport. I hit play. Mark's voice came through, muffled by wind. "We'll change the locks after takeoff." "He won't come back tonight." For a moment I forgot to breathe. The message had uploaded automatically when I'd charged my phone the next morning. It was still there, untouched, time-stamped, undeniable. I copied it onto a flash drive, labeled it Voicemail Exhibit E, and added it to the folder. I stared at the label until my reflection blurred in the plastic sleeve. The next morning, November 11th, Ruth came over with 2 thermoses of coffee. "You ready for tomorrow?" she asked. "I've never been more ready," I said. We sat at the kitchen table where everything had started. She asked if I'd forgive them afterward. I thought about it. "Maybe," I said. "But first they need to understand what they took." Ruth nodded. Make them say it. That evening I laid my suit out on the bed, ironed the cuffs, polished my shoes again. On the nightstand, the deed, the receipts, the bank letter, the voicemail, the ring recording, and the notarized affidavits, all stacked in order like a story with one ending. I slipped a note on top, written in my wife's old stationery, "This house is still ours," at 11:58 p.m. I turned off every light except the one over the kitchen table. The manila folder sat in the center, the porch lamp spilling gold onto its edge. The same table where they'd once asked me to sign it all away would now bear witness when I took it back. Tomorrow was November 12th. Courtroom 3C, 9 Sud a.m. For the first time since the airport, I slept straight through the night. November 12th, 9 a.m. Courtroom 3C smelled like furniture polish and old victories. The marble floor echoed every step, like it wanted to make sure the world heard who came for justice. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Mr. Cho, my hands folded over the manila folder that had become my armor. Across the aisle, Mark and Lila whispered to each other. Lila wore a cream blazer too bright for a courtroom. Mark looked like a contractor who hadn't slept in a week. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Alvarez entered, a woman in her late 50s, with eyes that looked like they could cut glass. "This is Walker versus Walker," she said, flipping open the docket. "Real estate and elder conveyance matter. Let's proceed." Cho stood, his voice calm and steady. "Your Honor, this is a case of familial betrayal concealed as filial care. My client, Mr. Walker, was misled into transferring his home under the guise of Medicaid planning. Days later, his son and daughter-in-law abandoned him at the airport, changed the locks, and attempted to leverage the property for a contractor's line of credit." Mark's attorney, a man too slick for the Midwest, rose. "Your Honor, this is a family misunderstanding. My clients acted in good faith, securing a family asset for joint use." The judge raised one eyebrow. "You left him at the airport," Mark stammered. "That was a miscommunication." Cho opened the folder with the slow confidence of someone revealing a crime scene. "If it please the court, Exhibit A, warranty deed signed October 10th. He held it up. The circled paragraph practically glowed under the overhead lights. "Grantor reserves a life estate with right to rescind upon abandonment or caregiver neglect." He handed it to the clerk, then turned to the judge. "Please note the life estate clause, initialed by both parties." The judge nodded, reading it herself. "And this was notarized?" "By my office," Cho said. Mark's lawyer shifted in his seat. "That clause was explained to them, but... The judge cut him off. "It says what it says." Cho stepped forward. "Exhibit B, Uber affidavit, signed by Deshaun Miller, notarized Nov 1. It states Mr. Walker told him, quote, 'They changed my locks and left me at the airport.'" The judge skimmed it. "Time stamped?" "Yes, Your Honor. October 28, 9:41 p.m. Cho turned again. "Exhibit C, underwriting, hold letter from Community Savings Bank, dated Nov 5. The bank denied funding for the defendant's contractor line, citing a reserved life estate defect." Martha's printed signature sat clear at the bottom, along with a notation, "Pending legal clarification of grantor's rights." The judge glanced over her glasses. "So the bank recognized the defect, but they didn't." "Precisely," Cho said. Mark tried to speak. "We were just trying to—" "Please don't interrupt," the judge said, not even looking at him. Cho motioned to Ruth, who sat in the second row, clutching her purse. "Exhibit D, video footage from neighbor Ruth Davis's doorbell camera, recorded October 29th, shows the defendants arriving at midnight with boxes and a man measuring the porch." The screen flickered to life on the portable monitor. Leela's voice filled the courtroom. "We'll knock this wall down by Thanksgiving." Someone in the back actually gasped. Lila's face flushed red. "That's not fair." "I didn't mean—" The judge held up a hand. "Mrs. Walker, you'll have your turn." Cho wasn't done. "Exhibit E, audio recording recovered from the plaintiff's phone. Time-stamped October 28th, 6:39 p.m. He pressed play. Mark's voice came through, loud and unmistakable. "We'll change the locks after takeoff." "He won't come back tonight?" The sound of his own words drained the color from Mark's face. Lila reached for his arm. He pulled it away. Judge Alvarez leaned back, pen tapping against the bench. So, abandonment at a transportation terminal, lock change, attempted encumbrance, and now intent to sell before hearing. Quite a list for a misunderstanding. Cho handed up one last item, the certified eviction letter Lila had mailed. And finally, Your Honor, a written attempt to revoke occupancy from a life tenant, my client, within days of the transfer. The judge read the line aloud, her voice dripping disbelief, effective immediately. We hereby revoke your permission to occupy said premises. She set the letter down slowly. You tried to evict your father from his own life estate in 3 days. Lila looked down. Mark said nothing. The judge turned to me. Mr. Walker, do you wish to make a statement? I stood, every nerve steady now. Your Honor, I spent 38 years building that house. Every nail, every wall, paid for with my back and my knees. They said it was for my protection. Then they left me at gate C5 with a dead phone and called it family. I reached into my coat and pulled out the original rebooking receipt, $312.40, and laid it on the table. That's what it cost me to come home and find the locks changed. That's the receipt for betrayal. The judge looked at Cho. Counsel, anything further? One last note, he said. This entire event began under the claim of Medicaid planning, yet the defendants never filed any such paperwork. They simply used the term as leverage to obtain title. Judge Alvarez closed her binder, sighed, and looked over the rim of her glasses at Mark and Lila. You know what my father used to say? If you lie in a courtroom, make sure the walls aren't holding microphones. You two forgot every wall in this case was listening. She raised her gavel. Temporary restraining order granted. Title quieted in favor of the plaintiff. Any further alterations or financial activity will result in contempt and sanctions. The sound of the gavel echoed through the room like the clean break of a bone finally set right. Outside on the courthouse steps, the air bit with November clarity. Ruth hugged me like a sister. You did it, she said. Mark stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring at his shoes. Lila looked everywhere but at me. You could have just asked for help, I said quietly. Mark's voice cracked. I thought I was helping us. No, I told him. You were helping yourself, and I'm part of the U.S. you forgot. He turned away. I didn't call him back. The courthouse doors reflected my own face, tired, older, but free. For the first time in weeks, I recognized the man staring back. Justice doesn't come with fireworks. It comes in envelopes. The next morning, November 13th, I found one waiting on my porch. A thick packet from the Cuyahoga County Clerk's office, stamped and sealed. Inside, the signed restraining order, the quiet title judgment, and the judge's notes in tidy cursive. Plaintiff's life estate confirmed. Defendant's actions constituted abandonment and neglect. That sentence read better than any hymn. I took it to the kitchen, set it next to my coffee, and for the first time since October 28th, I didn't need sugar. I just stared at it, this stack of paper that had burned through every lie my son and his wife tried to build. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed. It was Martha from Community Savings Bank again. Mr. Walker, she said, almost cheerful, your son's contractor line was officially withdrawn this morning. The system cancelled it when the restraining order hit the title database. You mean they can't touch the house? I asked. Not unless you stop breathing, she said, chuckling. And even then, the estate clause keeps them out till probate. For the first time I laughed, not out of spite, but out of relief that the system, slow as it is, sometimes remembers whose side it's on. Around noon, Ruth knocked, balancing a pan of brownies and the kind of smile that only good neighbors can give. Figured you could use something sweet after that bitter ride, she said. We sat at the table where I'd once signed away my home, now reclaimed. She told me the contractor who'd been sniffing around finally came by that morning muttering about pulled funding and cancelled permits. He left a business card. On the back he'd scrawled, "Sorry, didn't know the whole story." I slipped it into my notebook under evidence. Vanished opportunities. Later that afternoon there was another knock. Not Ruth this time. Mark. Alone. He looked smaller than I remembered. Shoulders hunched, winter jacket zipped to the throat. He held a single envelope in his hand. "Dad, we didn't think it'd go this far." "Neither did I said, stepping aside but not inviting him in. "What's in your hand?" He held it up. 2 envelopes, actually. The first was thick, the second thin. Lila wanted to send a formal apology. I drafted a mediation proposal. I pointed to the table. "Set them down." The thicker one was handwritten. Lila's looping cursive. "We got caught up in pressure and opportunity. We never meant to hurt you." She'd underlined "never" twice, as if the pen itself doubted her. The thinner envelope held the real offer. Cho's earlier suggestion, reflected almost word for word. They'd sign a no-encumbrance agreement. I'd keep my life estate, and in return, I'd contribute $5,000 to help them pay off their short-term debts if they completed a financial counseling course about elder. Boundaries. Mark's eyes darted to mine. "It's not about money anymore," he said. "Good," I replied, "because mine's staying where it belongs." He swallowed hard. "You really would have gone through with court again if she appealed?" I nodded. "I wasn't bluffing. I built this house one paycheck at a time. You thought paper made it yours, but it's sweat that makes it home." He nodded, eyes wet. "I'm sorry, Dad." I took the signed mediation form and said, "Then start by staying sorry. Keep your word." When he left, I locked the door behind him, not out of anger, but instinct. Locks aren't about fear. They're about peace. By evening, the street was quiet. Ruth's porch light flickered like a heartbeat next door. I made myself a small dinner, the same as always. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes, my wife's old recipe from 1986. I ate it at the kitchen table with the court order propped against the napkin holder. At 8:23 p.m., I picked up my pen and wrote in my notebook, November 13th, victory in paper. Court ruled. Bank froze. Contractor vanished. Family humbled. House safe. Then beneath that, one sentence that felt truer than anything I'd written before. Justice isn't loud. It's the sound of a key turning the right way. I closed the notebook, poured a small glass of bourbon, and sat by the window. Outside, the porch light glowed steady and gold, the same one that had flickered the night they tried to erase me. Now, it burned for me. By November 20th, the frost had thickened on the lawns, and the neighborhood smelled like wood smoke and Thanksgiving prep. My house, finally felt like it was breathing again. The clang of the old heater was comforting, not haunting. And on the kitchen wall, under a Brown's magnet, hung a single sheet of paper that made it all real. Final mediation agreement. Life estate, non-interference. We'd signed it 3 days earlier in a conference room that could have been anywhere. In America, stale coffee, humming fluorescent lights, one clock ticking too loud. Cho sat to my left, calm as a surgeon. Across the table, Mark stared at the formica while Lila twisted her wedding band. The mediator, a woman with kind eyes and a voice like gravel, slid the agreement between us. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker," she said, "you agree not to alter, encumber, or occupy the property without written consent, and you acknowledge the prior abandonment and rescission as final." Lila signed first, her hand shaking just enough to show she knew what she'd done. Then Mark, then me. The pens clicked in sequence, 1, 2, 3, like locks sliding into place. When it was over, Cho handed me a second copy and said, "File it somewhere you can see it every day." So I did, right on the fridge, next to a faded photo of my wife holding a paint roller in that same kitchen, 20 years younger and still laughing. On November 22nd, Judge Alvarez approved the mediation. Her ruling note was short, typed neatly on a single line. "The court commends the plaintiff for protecting his dignity through lawful means." I read that line out loud 3 times. Lawful means. The words tasted like closure. Later that day, I sent copies of the order to everyone who'd been part of my small army. To Martha at Community Savings, I attached a note. Thanks for respecting the fine print. She replied with a smiley emoji and the message, retire in peace, Mr. Walker. To Ruth, I brought a pie. She hugged me, whispering, the good guys don't always win, but sometimes they file first. To Deshawn, the Uber driver who unknowingly saved me, I mailed a thank you card with a gas gift card inside. He texted back a picture of his dashcam, still rolling, still recording truth. That night, I sat by the window as the sun went down early, the way it does in November when the world seems to fold into itself. The street was quiet, except for kids tossing footballs and the faint rattle of wind through gutters. Normal sounds, the kind of sounds you don't appreciate until you almost lose them. I went through the folder one last time, every receipt, every signature, every stapled page, and realized something strange. None of it looked like revenge anymore. It looked like proof that I hadn't vanished, that I'd stood up, even when family made it feel like standing was useless. Ruth called just before bed. You hear from Mark? Not since he dropped off the paperwork, I said. You gonna talk to him again? I paused, looking at the house around me, the steady light, the repaired keypad, the framed court order glowing in lamplight. When I'm ready, I said, and when he remembers what home actually means. Before hanging up, she said softly, You got your... It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was a boundary with compassion, the kind my wife would have insisted on. She used to say, You can close a door without locking it. A few days later, December 3rd, Mark showed up. No cameras, no speeches, just him, hands in pockets, eyes red from cold or maybe regret. He looked at the shelf and gave a quiet laugh. You're really doing this? Boundaries feed peace, I said. He looked past me into the house. It's warmer than I remember. Maybe because it's honest now. He nodded, silent for a while. Then he said, I thought equity was the prize. I looked at him the way fathers do when they want to love and scold in the same breath. Character compounds faster, I said. He smiled a little at that. You sound like Mom. I learned from the best. We stood there in the cold until the silence between us felt less like distance and more like truce. When he left, he didn't ask to come inside. That was progress. Inside, I opened my notebook, its spine now swollen with receipts, letters, and coffee stains, and wrote December 3rd, lessons from a deed. Never sign what you don't understand. Never surrender where you sleep. Love your children, but read every clause. Then I added one final line. Peace doesn't mean forgetting. It means living without flinching. That evening, I went to the church seniors group, the same one whose pamphlet had helped me see transport abandonment for what it was. They asked if I'd share my story. I said yes, not for pity, but for warning. I brought photocopies of the deed clause and handed them around. Write this line in your wills, I told them. Add it before you need it. A few folks took notes. One woman squeezed my hand and whispered, You saved your home and gave us courage to save ours. When I got home, the porch light flickered once and steadied, like the house was nodding in approval. I made tea, turned on the radio, and let an old Sinatra song fill the air. The place felt alive again, not as a possession, but as a partner. I looked around and whispered to the walls, We made it back, didn't we? And somewhere between the hum of the heater and the faint whistle of the wind through the eaves, I swear I heard the floorboards answer, Welcome home. 2 weeks later, mid-December, snow had powdered every rooftop like confectioner's sugar. The neighborhood glowed soft under Christmas lights. My porch smelled faintly of pine from the wreath Ruth insisted on hanging. Life had fallen back into rhythm. Coffee at 6, a slow walk to the mailbox, the evening news humming low. That morning, the mail held something odd. A glossy postcard from a remodeling company. Bold letters across the front read, Kitchen Reno in 10 days. Holiday discount. The same company that once printed an estimate from my own printer. I couldn't help but laugh, loud and real. I turned the postcard over, scribbled a note in red pen, and slipped it back into the return envelope. Project cancelled. permanently. Then, just for myself, I tucked in a photocopy of the court order. Sometimes justice needs a sense of humor. By noon, the snow had thickened. Ruth waved from her porch, holding up 2 mugs of cocoa. "Peace looks good on you, Harold," she shouted through the wind. "Feels good too," I called back. "Better than revenge ever did." Inside, the heat kicked on, and the windows fogged. I sat by the table, the same one where this whole mess had started, and wrote the final entry in my notebook. December 15th. Full circle, the house stands, the locks hold, the son learns, the father forgives. The phone rang mid-sentence. It was Mark. His voice was careful, like he was testing the air. "Dad, Lila wants to apologize in person. Can we come by?" "Sure," I said. "Tomorrow, daylight." They arrived just after noon the next day, bundled in winter coats, snow clinging to their boots. Lila held a small wrapped box, probably cookies or peace offerings. I invited them inside, no cameras, no witnesses, just family. She handed me the box. Inside was a framed copy of the handwritten apology she'd signed during mediation. "It's a reminder," she said softly. "For me, not you." I set it on the mantel beside my wife's photo. "Looks like it belongs there," I said. Mark shifted awkwardly. "Dad, I keep thinking about that day at the airport." I looked him dead in the eye. "So do I," he nodded. "I can't fix it." "No," I said, "but you can outlive it." We sat for a while in that honest quiet, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. When they left, Mark turned at the door. "You didn't lose me, Dad," I smiled, slow and certain. "No," I said. "You gave me away." I just found my way back. When the door closed, I locked it gently, not out of fear but habit. The sound of the latch clicking felt like punctuation, the kind that ends a sentence and begins peace. That evening, I lit a single lamp in the living room. Snowflakes drifted past the window like falling ash from an old fire finally burned out. I poured 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for the empty chair across from me, and whispered, "We did it, Margaret. You'd have liked the ending." Outside, the streetlights flickered, and the porch light held steady. The same bulb that had blinked the night they schemed now glowed warm and unwavering. Before heading to bed, I walked to the front door and looked back at the house. Walls that had kept my memories, floors that had heard my vows, and a table that had witnessed my justice. I smiled and said to the quiet, "Funny thing about paper, it can take you home or it can save it. Depends who signs first." Then I turned off the lights, leaving only the porch lamp burning through the snow. Locks clicked, furnace hummed, and peace settled in for good. And that's how a man who was left at an airport came home, by reading the fine print and refusing to let love be notarized away.